Oh. Okay. Bible Alive John, the witness of John about himself. The following presentation would be impossible without these resources. So if you're wondering again, where is he getting this stuff from? It's these books. And these books. Especially these. This Bible Alive series is about becoming considerate Bible readers to our Middle Eastern ancestors in the faith. Offering a social science commentary on the gospel called John. Presenting an historically sensitive cross-cultural comparative set of lenses with which to hear, read, see the gospel called John as its original audience did. Realizing that we use for life a very different set of lenses. American, Western lenses. Attempting to interpret John in a way that would be fair to its original author and audience. People from a culture very different than ours. And maintaining attention and interest on important features of our modern world. Once more, let's take a look at the structure of John, since right today we're going to get into the narrative of John. This is a basic outline. You can divide John again into 5 parts. The first part being the prologue, the hymn of the Logos, a poem about the Messiah's cosmic status. That's John chapter 1, verses 1 to 18. Everything the original author of John wants to tell us is contained in those 18 verses. And everything that happens after is just rehash. The second part is the book of signs. Chapter 1, verse 19 through chapter 12, verse 50. What's highlighted in red is what we're going to be dealing with for the next couple weeks. The third part is the book of glory. Chapter 13, verse 1 to chapter 20, verse 31. This section deals with Jesus' farewell discourse at the farewell dinner through the passion and resurrection accounts all the way to Thomas's confession. But the beloved disciple died, the person who was the main author behind this gospel, and therefore his community felt it was necessary to pen an epilogue, attesting to the author's veracity. Chapter 21, verses 1 to 25. Finally, there is a 5th part, a later insertion. Jesus rescuing a woman caught in adultery. That story does not belong in the Gospel of John, but it was too good to lose. So they had to fit it somewhere, and they shoehorned it into the text of John. It is alien to the original composition. Okay, so today we're going to be dealing with what's highlighted in red there. Let's get to that. John chapter 1, verses 19 through 28. And this is the testimony given by John when the Judeans sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" And he said, "Huk emi, I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." Then they said to him, "Who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, "Why then are you dunking if you are neither the Messiah, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" John answered them, "I dunk with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know, the one who is coming after me. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal." This took place in Bethany, across the Jordan, where John was dunking. the opening poem, John chapter 1, verses 1 to 18, which is everything the author of this gospel wants to tell us, the first item the author of John deals with is the personage of John the Dunker, often called in our church, John the Baptist or John the Baptizer. An ostensibly well-known prophetic type of person who practiced the symbolic dipping or dunking of Israelites in the living or running waters of the Jordan River. This first segment presents John's testimony or witness concerning himself. The Judeans in Jerusalem send priests and Levites to determine the identity of the dunker. John chapter 1, verse 19. And this is the testimony given by John, the dunker, when the Judeans sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" The prologue indicates the God-designed role for John the dunker and Jesus, the Word, the light. But this is unknown to the Judeans, and that really shouldn't surprise us, because the Judeans are in what? Light or darkness? They're in darkness. So how could they possibly know? And even if you go and tell them, will they get it? No, they can't even get the earthly things. And to talk about Jesus and John the Dunker, his witness, is to talk about epiurania, sky vault things. You can't get the sky vault things if you can't even get the epagaia, the earthly things. They're in darkness. Hearts full of darkness. The question they raise, "Who are you?" however, will hang over the rest of the Johannine story. It will go all the way to chapter 20, verse 31. This question is very important. And it's already been given. The answer's already been provided in the first 18 verses. From the first line of the narrative proper, John chapter 1, verse 19, there is a tension which exists between the Judeans and God's agents in the human story, Jesus Christ, the Son, the incarnate Word, and his witness, John the Dunker. Those are the agents of God. John chapter 1, verse 20. He confessed and did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." The Dunker introduces the messianic theme into the interrogation that he's being given by denying that he is the Messiah. The pleonastic introduction to these first words of the Dunker, "he confessed but did not deny, but confessed," is an indication that the right confession of messiahship will be important to the right understanding of the identity of both the Dunker and of Jesus. That's very important as the text moves along. How you answer this question will show if you're in the light or in the darkness. The Dunker's interlocutor suggests that if he is not the Messiah, then maybe John the Dunker might be one of the expected precursor figures of the Messiah, the forerunners. Maybe he's Elijah. Malachi chapter 4, verse 5 tells us this, "Lo, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the day of Yahweh comes, the great and terrible day, to turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with doom. Lo, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the day of Yahweh comes, the great and terrible day." So there was an expectation that in Israel, in one of the traditions of Israel, in the prophetic tradition, that before the Messiah comes, Elijah's going to come to make ready the way, right? Sirach chapter 48, verse 4, and verses 10 to 12a. "How awesome are you, Elijah," praises Ben Sira, "whose glory is equal to yours. You, Elijah, are destined, it is written, in time to come to put an end to wrath before the day of Yahweh, to turn back the hearts of fathers toward their sons, and to reestablish the tribes of Jacob. Blessed is he who shall have seen you before he dies. O Elijah, most honorable is he, enveloped in the whirlwind. Elijah, you'll recall, was believed translated into being an angel in Skyvault. He was taken up into Skyvault in a fiery chariot. That's his disciple, Elisha, witnessing that, see, in the icon. Well, maybe he is Elijah, or maybe perhaps he is not Elijah. Perhaps he is the prophet who was also expected to usher in the Messianic era, he being John the Dunker. Deuteronomy 18, verse 15 and verse 18, Moses said, "A prophet like me will Yahweh your God raise up for you from among your own kinsmen. To him you shall listen." Verse 18, Yahweh tells Moses, "I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their kinsmen, and will put my words into his mouth. He shall tell them all that I command him." And a document found at Qumran in the Dead Sea Scrolls puts it this way: "Until there shall come a prophet and the messiahs," plural, "of Aaron and Israel." Two messiahs. One of Aaron and one of Israel. If that sounds confusing, that there was expected by one tradition in Israel, one Judaism in Israel, the people who wrote the documents of Qumran, two messiahs or multiple messiahs, don't let that trouble you too much. Because in the first century, if anything was common about the understanding of Messiah, it's this: Messiah had to do with political religion, had to do with establishing theocracy, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of Skyvault, sometimes mistranslated as the kingdom of heaven. That pretty much all traditions understood the Messiah had to deal with. But that was about it that was common. Because Messiah in first century Israel was like Heinz 57 varieties. You ask two Israelites a question in the first century about the Messiah, you get three answers. That's just how it was. So nobody had a very clear understanding of what the Messiah was, what his precursor figures or preparers would be like. Would it be Elijah? Would it be the prophet? Was Elijah the prophet spoken of by Moses? There were a lot of opinions. A lot of opinions. So to call Jesus the Messiah, by the way, isn't to say that much. We have to get a context in that. All right, let's continue. Then they said to him, John the Dunker, "Who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" In contemporary American society, the question, "Who are you?" is a question about what uniquely characterizes an individual person. It's a question that only the individual can really answer. That's how we are. We are the most individualistic culture of all time. But the Bible is radically different. In collectivist societies, however, identity normally derives from and traces back to the group in which one is embedded. So identity, personal or otherwise, in a collectivist society like that of the Bible, which is written by Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, North African personalities, collectivistic, dyadic personalities, identity is always group identity. You derive your identity from the group into which you are embedded. Everybody follow that? We've talked about that many times, right? But it bears going over again. John chapter 1, verse 19 to 23. Let's keep that in mind as we read this text. "And this is the testimony given by John when the Judeans sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, 'Who are you?' He confessed and did not deny, but confessed, 'I am not the Messiah.' And they asked him, 'What then? Are you Elijah?' And he said, I am not. Notice how different that is from John the Dunker in Mark, Matthew, and Luke. In Mark, Matthew, and Luke, John the Dunker is Elijah. He is Elijah. Not in John. Not in the fourth gospel. I am not. Are you the prophet? They ask him. He answered, no. Then they said to him, who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself? I have a question. Is John the Dunker an individualist American?
No.
Is Jesus an individualist American?
No.
Are the people, the Pharisees and the other Judeans who send delegation to see John the Dunker and ask him this question, who are you? Are they individualist Americans?
No.
Is the guy writing this story down called John and his beloved and his community, are they individualist Americans?
No.
No. All right. So what happens if you read who are you like the way we individualist Americans read it? Are we understanding it or are we distorting the text? Bingo, Evelyn. We're distorting the text. That's not a who are you. Think about Matthew, the Matthean Jesus, who do people say that I am? Right? Do you think Jesus is giving them a theology quiz? That he's an American giving them a theology quiz? No, this is a collectivist. You have to take the in incarnation and in inspiration seriously. The prefix in. Into what? Into what? Not into American culture. Into that of ancient Middle Eastern, North African personalities. Continuing, John the Dunker said, I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said. In contemporary American culture again, when somebody asks, who are you? We, Western people, immediately assume that the questioner wants to know who the person being questioned, how the person being questioned differs from all other individuals. That is because Americans see each individual person as unique, as more or less an integrated motivational and cognitive universe and dynamic center of awareness and judgment set over against other such individual persons, all of which are universes unto themselves. Emotional, psychological, freedoms, universes unto themselves. That's how you and I, whether we word it that way or not, observe and interpret and express each other to each other. Right? Is that how Jesus and John the Dunker and the people asking John the Dunker questions and the Johannine community who wrote the text called John and all the Bible writers, is that how they perceived and interpreted and thought about and communicated reality? Did they see every individual as an integrated motivational and cognitive universe with dynamic freedoms, a dynamic center of awareness and judgment set over against other individual personal universes? No.
But we view the individual characters in the Bible as that.
Therefore, we are distorting them, Mary. We are distorting them, and we are reading the Bible ethnocentrically, according to our culture. We're misunderstanding them. Let's continue with this. So this yellow here represents individualist cultures. Only today 10 to 20%. The red represent collectivistic cultures. Notice the part of the world from which the Bible comes, the Mediterranean and Middle East, is red, not yellow. Has been for 4,000 years and before that. And before that. The sort of individualism that we know and share has been and is extremely rare in the world's cultures, and is certainly absent from the world of the New Testament. And that would include John. In the world of the New Testament, folks, When someone asks, "Who are you?" he or she normally expected to hear some kind of group identifier, like son of Joseph from Nazareth, or sperma of Abraham, descendant of Abraham. They saw every person as deeply embedded into a group, and therefore they assumed that identity is possible only in relation to others who form this group. Can everybody follow that? Does that make sense? I know we have a new person here. Is it making sense? The flow makes sense?
It's the first time, so
I tell you, understood. Don't get too intimidated. Sometimes the first time is always a little rough for people, but as you keep coming to classes, it begins to stick, and it's like, oh, okay. It may sound unfamiliar. Don't let that intimidate you. You want to be challenged by things that you haven't heard before. Mortimer Adler says precisely the book you need to read is not, if you're only reading books that are on your level, you'll never go anyplace. The book we precisely need to read, according to Mortimer Adler, is the one that's up here. Because that way I can help, by the community and the author, pull myself up. See? But that takes work. No pain, no gain. So it might be a little confusing at first, but let's just stick with it, okay? If you have any questions, my sister, just feel free to ask. Feel free to field them.
It means that if you didn't belong to a certain house, I should say, group, you were outside.
You were dead. In the Mediterranean world, if you don't have a group, human existence is simply not possible. And that's what happened to people without groups, right? They become outcasts, and they're dead within 18 months if they're male, or 6 months if they're female. And we have skeletal proof of that. We have fossil evidence of human beings in those conditions. Yep. Without a group, for Mediterranean dyadic collectivistic personalities, life is impossible. Yeah. And our church comes from that world. Think about that, individualist Americans. So anyway, our biblical ancestors in the faith saw every person as deeply embedded into a group, and therefore assumed that identity is possible only, and life is possible only, in relation to the others who form this group. For most people, this was the family or kinship network, and it meant that individuals neither acted nor thought of themselves as persons independent of the family group. What one member of the family was, every member of the family was, psychologically as well as in every other way. Mediterranean persons are what anthropologists call dyadic, from twin, the Greek word for twin, or collectivist. That is to say that they are other-oriented people who depend on in-group others to provide them with a sense of who they are. Consider the following chart of comparisons between collectivistic, dyadic, or strong group people and individualist or weak group persons. Collectivist is much concerned about the effect of one's decisions on one's present standing and future chances, whereas individualists are little concerned about the effect of one's decisions on others, beyond friends and nuclear family. Collectivists are prepared to share material resources with group members, but individualists are expected to provide their own material resources if they are not part of the nuclear family. A collectivist is ready to share less tangible resources with other group members. For example, giving up some interesting activity for group ends. Whereas the individualist generally is not expected to and will not share less tangible resources with others, often not even with the nuclear family. For example, time to watch weekend football game. The collectivist is willing to adopt the opinions of others, especially those highly esteemed in the wider group who have a higher honor ranking. But the individualist is expected to form their own opinion on a range of issues, especially politics, religion, and sex. And gender. Expert opinion accepted only in law and health, and this only for oneself and one's nuclear family. Understand this, and you can see why feminism, for example, among many things, is only possible among individualists. It could only spring out of individualism. Collectivists are constantly concerned about self-preservation and loss of face, since these reflect upon the group and one's position or honor in the group. But the individualist is little concerned about one's impression on others unless others are involved in his or her goals, like job placement. Embarrassment affects the individualist and at times the nuclear family, but not any group at large. The collectivist believes and feels and experiences an interconnectedness with the whole group, so that positive and negative behavior rebound to the whole group. But the individualist acts as though insulated from others. His actions are not perceived to affect others, and others' actions do not affect her. The collectivist senses himself or herself to be intimately involved in the lives of other group members, contribute to the lives of others in the group. But the individualist's life is segmented. They feel involved in the lives of very few people, and when they are, it is in a very specific way always. For example, as a teacher, as a lawyer, as a physician, etc. In sum, collectivists have concern for all in-group members. There is a sense of oneness with other in-group members, a perception of complexities and relationships, and a tendency to keep other people in mind. The root of this concern is group integrity. But for the individualist, his or her concern is largely for themselves and their nuclear family. Individualists are insulated from other people, sense themselves independent of and unconnected to others, and tend to think of self-reliance alone. John and his community, ladies and gentlemen, were collectivists. Thus, it is important to identify whether someone is of Nazareth or of Tarsus or wherever. Encoded in these labels is all the information needed to rank any person properly on the prevailing honor scale of social statuses. With this information, people knew how to interact properly with each other. Let's stop there.